afternoon. I hope the weather is clement wherever you are. It is particularly unclement and wintry here. I read last night another short story from this fantasy and science fiction magazine, which I picked up very randomly while I was in England. I was in Hay-on-Wye, Addie's bookshop. They've got a £1 alley, and I picked that up very, very randomly, and I'm very glad I did, because everything I've read from it so far is excellent. So this time I read All Possible Worlds by Rosel George Brown, of whom I had never heard. Have you heard of them? Well, the internet told me a little bit here. Rosel George Brown was born in 1926. She was an American science fiction author. I didn't even realize it was a she. Rosel is not a name that I'm familiar with as a first name. So from New Orleans, she lived there, she got married, she wrote well-received works mainly in the late 1950s up to the mid-1960s, and she died in 1967. I don't think I've ever read anything by this author. She's got a couple of novels. It looks like she's got a fiction series called Sybil Sue Blue, which I don't think I've read. There's 2 in that as far as I can tell. And a novel of hers is Earthblood. Other than that, she seems to be mainly collections and short stories. But she has a good dozen short stories, and this one is very well written. So, Of All Possible Worlds is unusual. It's like all the stories in this one have been unusual so far. It starts off with a man who is on his way to a foreign world that has never been visited. There's this very atmospheric writing. It's almost philosophical rather than descriptive in some ways. And while the story sounds like your classical adventure science fiction story, it is actually very contemplative in atmosphere. So it's first-person narration. It's clearly a man, and it starts with, "I stirred in my colloidal suspension. I could feel the transverse waves I had created bound through my little universe and rebound against me again. I was waking up. I was nearing the planet then, Algol 2. And it talks about what he's experiencing with very little reference to the society he comes from. It's futuristic, clearly. They've created these little modules. I can't remember. He calls them nomads or momads, which really reminds me of Filippo Zefama. Anyway, it's basically a single person method of delivering you to a foreign planet where it will land. You are in suspension, your lungs are full of fluid, and it carries nothing with you. You don't have food, you don't have protection, you don't have any way to get back into your little modular nomadic space thing until 5 years have elapsed. And as he's lying there, slowly awakening, slowly stretching, making sure he doesn't awake too fast, because if you wake up too fast, the fluid in your lungs will drown you. It sounds like a very hazardous, very precarious undertaking. Anyway, he runs through in his thoughts the reasons why he's done it, and one is that, yes, he's an anthropologist who wants to discover another world, but he's well aware that most of these little monads return empty, and the risks seem to outweigh any likelihood of a rational person engaging in them, but we don't really go into that. We've just got this sense of hazard and the world closing behind you potentially forever. So he lands on this planet, Algol 2. He's basically thrown out of his little fluid-filled spaceship and arrives naked, gasping, barely breathing on the shore, with eyes that have not yet adjusted to the light. So again, you've got this very philosophical, transitional feel. It's almost, I don't know, like a symbolic experience rather than a practical experience. I was just in the mood for the story like this, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So he lands there, and against all the odds, there's a sentient race there, and they're described as grey, attenuated face came near mine. Food, I said, and pointed at my mouth. A hand, too smooth and slightly scaled, helped me up. The hand wrapped twice around mine, and I saw it was opposed thumb and tentacle. And then he's given food and drink, and he lives with these people for a couple of years. At the 2.5 year mark, a notification blings into his brain telling him that he's halfway there, and we learn that just before the 5 year mark arrives, he will be given another notification warning he needs to find his way back to his module, get back inside, and then return to Earth. Presumably Earth. I don't remember it mentioning Earth. And the rest of it is him living with this sentient species, which are very clearly not human. He hypothesizes a few times about what they might be, if there's an amphibious element, an aquatic element. The scales don't end up being scales, just a silvery body. So he seems to be allocated to this one female of the species to live in the same dwelling with them. When she spoke, it was a stream of glottal sounds that sounded a little like German, and behind the noise of her speech was the muffled power of the sea sound. So you got the sound of the sea all the way through this book. It turns out it's actually their breathing. So she gives him her name, which I have forgotten, and isn't really used. Oh, again, sounds like a bit German. It's a bit like Gretchen, if there's a lot more THs and CHs in it. I can't pronounce that. Sorry, Rosel George Brown, I just can't. And it talks about the small events of their day. They wake up, they go to the place where food is made, they're given a stone ball, which they take back to their hut and they eat. And everything is very, very regulated. And he thinks at some stage about how this world should be very dull, but it's not actually dull for him. He isn't experiencing it as dull. He's just totally involved in it. He tries to find out the sort of things that a good anthropologist should find out about the race and their history. And we get the sense of this sense of suspended animation. And finally he realizes there's no children in the village. She takes him to a temple, and the temple is full of written language. And when he asks what it is, there's no idols, there's no gods, there's no deified element. And when he asks what that is, she says, this is the information that the children will need to do the things, to carve stone bowls, to cook, to hunt, all these things. And it's this very stratified society where nothing really much happens, but he doesn't get bored with it. And he largely gives up the attempt to learn more about it and just lives with it. And he says naturally he falls in love with this woman from another alien species. No hanky-panky or evidence of love as appears, but the emotive attachment is there. Now, on one hand, I didn't find myself surprised by the direction this story went in, but I'm still not going to reveal the end of it because this is a really nicely balanced, well-written story which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I don't think I'd have enjoyed it quite as much if I'd have seen the ending coming more than a few paragraphs ahead. As I was reading, I was kind of foreseeing where we were going with it, but the actual reading experience leads you there so nicely. I think it would be disrespectful to the story to reveal the ending. I would imagine, however, that somewhere on the internet, if you really want to find it, it's going to be there. Now, Of All Possible Worlds was apparently published a good dozen times in various magazines in more than one language. So it was apparently quite valued at the time, but I hadn't heard of it before. As our protagonist realizes that this alien species is more and more alien than he thought, and they progress to the conclusion of where the children are coming from and what happens to the society after that, I found myself borne along delightfully. This was a fantastic short story. I really enjoyed it. I am getting more and more thrilled that I bought this lovely little magazine. I'm actually enjoying it more than I think any other magazine of science fiction and fantasy that I've had. It's always been some stories are good, some stories aren't. There's a lot of filler from editors and stuff. This has no editor notes, it has no extras, it just has the stories. My next one, I believe, is a non-fiction by Isaac Asimov. So yes, thank you very much for watching this moderate review for short story of All Possible Worlds by Rosel George Brown, who I'm delighted to have become acquainted with. Thank you very much. Read good books.